Well, it's been a long 3 weeks in Starbase development history. This is episode 26 of Starbase Flyover Update, and we'll take you through the changes preceding IFT2's launch, as well as the 3 weeks of rebuilds, upgrades, and construction since. We'll see the latest additions at the Star Factory, as well as what we think could be a new tower at Sanchez. My name is Jeff A, so let's buckle up and enjoy the flight. Alright, as usual, let's begin at MASSES, currently used by SpaceX to conduct cryogenic and structural testing. Special shout out to Procky for creating these labelled maps for all 4 sites at Starbase. Here's what it looked like in our previous flyover on November 18th. Watch as we slowly uncover the changes visible from the 8th to the 18th of November. And then from December the 3rd to our latest flyover on the 8th. Starting at the top of the MASSES test site, we can see that things have changed significantly with the removal of the test tank burst pad and clearing of the area. Our first area of focus is the setup of the batch plant for either concrete or a bentonite slurry. Bentonite is an absorbent swelling clay that typically forms from the weathering of volcanic ash with water. While we don't know the reason behind this plant, we believe it is related to the drills spotted in episode 24, which is now working at the top right hand side of the site. No rebar cages or caissons have been spotted, leading us to believe the holes are being filled with a slurry for soil stabilisation and strengthening, with the slurry possibly containing both concrete and bentonite. You can see the hoses routed from the pumps on the right hand side of the plant to the drill rig. The lack of rebar and solid piles indicates nothing too substantial will be built in this location, for now. Our next area of interest is the construction of formwork for what is speculated to be the 2 new vertical tanks. The foundation here is notably substantial. In case you missed it in episode 24, here's a render by the space engineer showing a possible configuration of a speculated booster hot firing stand. This is currently unconfirmed, so we should take this render with a pinch of salt. What do you think will end up in this location, which was cleared a few weeks ago? Supporting this theory, subcoolers have also been mounted on the pedestals, with possible drainage work ongoing to the left where the excavators have dug holes. Moving down slightly, we see the boosted testing station is now empty after B11 rolled back to Mega Bay 1 on the 19th of November, where it was lifted onto the engine installation stand. Moving over to the unknown building currently under construction, we can see more framework has been added to the roof and walls. Panning left, we can see S24.2 sitting snugly inside the structural test cage. This article is believed to have been tested. This can be seen in the deformation of the ring weld shown in this picture. Over here we see this new wide tank added to the liquid nitrogen farm. As seen in this ground photo when it was delivered on November 14th, this tank will serve to boost nitrogen capacity for cryoproofing tanks. On the top corner of MASSES, we see that the E-dome or elliptical dome test article made using stretch form steel panels has been scrapped after its burst pad was deconstructed last month, likely pointing to an end of its testing. Or it may have been abandoned as a testing article altogether, seeing as there were no bursts at the burst pad before its deconstruction. In the last 5 days up to the 8th of December, old test tank B7.1 has been carried to the front of the site by crane for scrapping operations to begin. A section of the nose cone jail was also removed from this area and placed near B7.1. This mysterious circular concrete slab has been poured. We're not sure what it's for yet. Meanwhile, at the rear of the site, the new concrete pad for the possible vertical tanks has been poured. Near the centre of the site adjacent to the ship and boosted cryo stations, this dirt lot has been levelled and the cryo vent pipe on the right removed ahead of what could be another concrete pour in the near future. Some new trench work can be seen here, possibly linking up with previous trenching from the far right hand side of the site. And with that, onto Sanchez. Here's a labelled map of the site for those unfamiliar or those who simply need a refresher. Now let's compare this photo from the flyover of November 8th, with the aerial shot captured on November 18th following IFT2. We decided to provide 3 comparisons since it's been a few weeks between flyovers, so here's the second one between November 18th and December 3rd. And finally through to the 8th of December. Let's get underway by looking at the far west side of the site where the conduit work is ongoing. Though it was previously believed the power may terminate at the vaults near the left rear corner of the fabrication building, it appears SpaceX has other ideas in mind. Another run of conduits has extended from those aforementioned vaults just down towards Highway 4 and beyond the front perimeter wall. Another collection of vaults is being set in the corner from which the conduit will head east parallel to the highway. It's unclear at this point why this is necessary, but one theory is that it could provide an additional power feed to the Star Factory expansion site, but on the highway side. If we switch views to see the backside of the fab building, we see what are likely tanks to support an air compressor setup on the right hand side. The blue piping is being fed from the tanks into the building at multiple locations. On the left side of the building, a stack of insulated cryopiping is lying in wait. We're not 100% certain what this is for yet, but we may have a pretty good idea. More on that in a moment. Shifting over to the stand construction area, we have quite a few new developments to share with you since our last flyover. Getting started with the third and potentially final booster engine installation stand at the top, we see the primary ring structure looks to be mostly complete. The clamp arms needed for the stand can be seen lying just to the left waiting for installation. A fresh coat of white paint is still needed for all of the components. As you'll see at the build site, this stand's destination has already been determined. Over to the right, we see the work platform for the stand is complete with the exception of the floor to cover the framework. What is that white structure next to the platform though? That remains a mystery to us currently. It's possible it is something to do with the smaller platform with the triangular cutouts over to the left, which is also a mystery as it turns out. If we look at the structure from a different angle, we see what look to be mounting plates on the ends of the legs. The triangular shape of this piece does seem to match up with the white structure seen under the smaller platform. We'll just have to wait and see how these pieces progress in the coming weeks. Moving over to the black stands, we can see the first stand has finally been removed from the area. But where did it go? Not actually too far away as it turns out. On November 21st, the stand made its first move from Sanchez and journeyed to the build site for what was likely fit checks before heading to the Rocket Garden the next day. Since showing up at the Rocket Garden, the stand has received the booster stabilization pins necessary for lowering and lifting vehicles to prevent engine skirt damage. The black steel adaptive frames we saw in this aerial from November 11th have been mounted with bolts to both SPMTs, with the black rings sitting on top via tabs on the stand and the hydraulic pins on the adapters. A safety railing has also been added to the perimeter for fall protection. As to the purpose of these stands, the mystery is now resolved, as you'll see later. Preparations for a third stand are already underway. The second stand, however, is still waiting for its clamp arms to be installed, which are waiting nearby. Skipping over the old ship transport stand still being worked on, we see the new white ring under construction with a familiar looking platform next to it. Based on the smaller diameter and mounting points for 6 clamps, we could be seeing an engine installation stand much like those built for boosters, but for ships instead. The cutouts at the end of the primary supports on the platform indicate mounting points for 6 legs. Do you think we'll also see multiples of these, possibly destined for Mega Bay 2? Let me know what you think in the comments. Check out this render from Chrome Kiwi of the ship engine installation stand. Moving on to what could be the most interesting and unexpected arrival at Starbase in quite some time, we have Orbital Launch Integration Tower components at Sanchez. On November 15th, just days before IFT2, a component for the top section of a launch tower arrived at Sanchez. We can see it here. However, this wouldn't be the last piece to show up. In the following days, a multitude of parts would show up by the truckload to be offloaded here at Sanchez. Remember that third tower SpaceX began constructing at Roberts Road in Florida that created a multitude of rumours? Turns out it's headed to Starbase. Sections 1 through 7 were built at Roberts Road, with the remainder of the components being brought here to complete sections 8 and 9 for the top. We can see multiple new concrete pads have been poured in this area formerly occupied by scrap components, which will support the leg bases for build out of the new sections. Where the additional sections will go until SpaceX is ready for stacking is anyone's guess, but they may try fitting some of those here as well. This brings us back to those cryopipes we discovered by the fabrication building earlier. These could be staged for plumbing the tower sections once delivered. As a reminder, as of the writing of this episode, SpaceX does not have approval from the Army Corps of Engineers to expand their current footprint at the launch site any further into the wetlands. so we could be waiting a while before these sections move again. Adjacent to this tower staging area to the right, where the old gas wells reside, the lot is looking much clearer, perhaps an indication of work to come. Shifting up to the electrical substation, the 3 Tesla Megapacks have been returned to the concrete pads after they had been removed in our flyover on the 18th. It's unclear at this time why they were removed to begin with. Now let's check in on the concrete bunker that has continued to grow in the past month. The most fortified structure at Sanchez continues to baffle it as it now stands a total of 3 stories tall, although the lowest floor was mostly filled with gravel prior to concrete pouring. After the second floor was poured, additional concrete walls were formed and poured, followed by what's anticipated to be the final floor, or the roof in this case. No more rebar is visible protruding from the walls, leading us to believe the building is as tall as it will get. The bundles of conduit entering the building from the north and east sides prior to construction lead us to believe this is still a structure for housing critical power components for the entire site. We're a little baffled by the presence of these drilled piles just next to the building, but we'll see what happens with these going forward. Zooming back out and looking at the far right of the image, we see stacks of conduit remaining on standby. They are likely being used at the front of the site along the highway as seen earlier. On November 18th, a crane-hoisted drill rig was spotted near the old air separation plant next to the large water tank. Auger bits can be seen resting in front of the tank and rebar above the crane for pile creation. Fast forward to December 3rd, and we now see a new building under construction next to the water tank. It's too early to tell what this building might be for, but it's going up quickly, so hopefully we won't have to wait long before we get some clues. Moving over to the left, we see an abandoned ship aft section awaiting its demise. This belongs or belonged to the future ship 33, which is, as you'll find out soon, is the victim of a change of plans. To round out Sanchez for this week, we'll take a look at the rocket garden. If you hadn't noticed by now, Ship 28 has finally been removed from the engine installation stand, completing what appeared to be SpaceX playing Starship Shuffle a few weeks ago. Starting November 20th, S30 was moved into the ring yard, then S31 was removed from the high bay and transported to the rocket garden, while S29 was rolled into the high bay in its place. A few nights later, between the 22nd and 23rd, S28 was removed from the engine stand after 3.5 months of work. Several hours later, S28 made its way into the high bay to finish work on the heat shield. S30 was then placed back into the high bay, rounding off the ship shuffle. While S31 waits in the garden, the rest will remain under construction in the high bay in preparation for various stages of flight readiness. After our flyover on the 3rd, Booster 10 also made its way to the rocket garden, which we'll see coming up soon. If we fast forward 5 days to December 8th, we can see crews found the white paint and got busy coating the new white stands as well as the ship maintenance platform. Speaking of platforms, the booster maintenance platform has received its covering. The covering plates for the ship platform can be seen above it. Off to the right, parts for an additional ship stand have arrived. Could we see a mirror of Megabay 1 and Megabay 2 for ships instead, with 3 engine installation stands across the back and 2 turntables in the front corners? Over at the old gas well lot, the concrete pours for incoming tower sections have found their way into this space. The formwork for the pads will hold the legs in place ahead of pouring. In an unexpected turn of events, what appeared to be Starlink ground station receivers have shown up at the northern border of the site. In case you were wondering, these are not the same receivers from the old tracking station lot, but instead additions. Could these end up on top of the concrete building? Let me know what you think in the comments. Yet another piece of Ship 33 has been moved out to be scrapped next to the aft section mentioned earlier. This time it's the common dome section. Finally, S26 has been moved within reach of the LR1750 crane next to the engine installation stand and the squid connected. Crews may be planning to remove the engines from the ship for reuse ahead of potential scrapping. Unfortunately, it appears this ship's fate may be sealed after SpaceX's announcement of the next full stack combo for IFT-3. That wraps it up for Sanchez, so let's catch up with what's happening next door at the build site. Here we can see SpaceX has been working hard post-launch to boost production capacity. Let's refer to Procky's map of the various bays and factories as we make our way around. Before we check out this week's progress, let's compare this photo from the flyover on November 8th with this photo taken 10 days later on the 18th, which was the day of the IFT2 launch. And then again between November the 18th through to December the 3rd. Now finally moving to this photo taken on December 8th to compare the changes of this past week. Looking first at Mega Bay 2, from the flyover on the 18th of November, we can see a concrete floor has mostly been laid in place of the dirt floor from previous weeks and has been finished in the picture from the 3rd of December. With Mega Bay 2 now featuring both its bridge cranes and an actual production floor, we can expect equipment and vehicles to begin moving inside shortly. In this photo and this ground shot from December 1st, the installation of windows for the office space has begun. Next up is Mega Bay 1, where we'll have to shift to this image to see Booster 10 on the engine installation stand before its rollout to the rocket garden on the evening of the 5th. The legs for the third booster engine installation stand have been placed in position, confirming our earliest speculation. Here's a render from a few weeks ago, again from Chrome Kiwi, to remind us what this will look like. Booster 12 is unseen in front of Booster 10, while Booster 11 moved from Massey's on November 20th and now sits on the second engine installation stand, receiving its share of fire-breathing Raptors. Carlos Nunez, aka Starbase Surfer, captured this awesome shot of B10 rolling out with its hot staging ring which had been installed the day prior. This is confirmation that the purpose of the new black stands is also for transport, with B10 being the first to take a ride. Zooming in, we see the latest hot staging ring has not had any visible design changes. This time-lapse from Lab Padre's rover cam gives us some detailed close-ups of the transport stand ring, adapter plates and their mountings. Workers have removed sheet iron cladding from over the doorway, possibly to gain access to the area for the door mechanism. The high bay certainly was crowded during this flyover. On the left sit ships 32 and 30 in the back and front respectively, as seen in this image. On the right of the high bay, unseen in this image, sit ships 29 and 28 in the front and back. These 4 ships, along with ship 31 in the rocket garden, are thought to be SpaceX's entire lineup of the maximum number of 5 ships allowed to fly in 2024. Elon Musk responded to this image saying that these would be the last of Starship version 1. This would imply that ship 34 onwards will be designated V2. Although its specific features are not yet known, it could be something as simple as Raptor version 3 engines with other minor upgrades to interior systems and even flap geometry. Although the V2 generation could very well feature lengthened starships with 9 engines in the near future. It was therefore no surprise to us that when we saw Ship 33's aft section being scrapped just a few days later on December 1st and can be seen in the aerial photo from the 3rd of December. Do you think all the ships inside the high bay will fly? Or will SpaceX skip a few to accelerate the jump to ship version 2 with more advanced Raptor engines? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Now moving back to this overhead shot, where we move to the right to take a look at Star Factory's southward expansion. Now here's something we haven't seen in a while, a vapour barrier surrounding these concrete footings poured within the last 2 weeks. This yellow material serves to prevent groundwater and water vapour from entering concrete, which can weaken its integrity and cause various other problems. If we compare the size of these concrete footings from July 7th, we can see how they are increasing in size as the Star Factory's expansion continues towards the high bay. The increase in size is only seen in the first 2 rows. Then they go back to their original size poured throughout the majority of the rest of the Star Factory. This could indicate that the loads lifted by the bridge cranes will be increasing as the nose cone sections proceed through here. Maybe this section will be taller, so they can integrate the payload bay and nose cones here. Hopefully it could also mean that we see some windows for Star Factory after all. Let's hear your thoughts in the comments. Over behind the village, accommodation, both tiny and permanent homes, has progressed. The area around the fabrication building over by Highway 4 is being cleaned up and the large argon tank has been removed. We can assume that all the pipework previously seen here is either at the launch site or near the fabrication building at Sanchez. Behind the Starlink building, we can also see the weather station has been removed. Jumping real quick to this photo taken on December 8th, we notice that the vapour barrier has been covered over by the ever-expanding concrete slab. In addition, on December 11th, Booster 12 was lifted onto one of the booster processing stands inside of Mega Bay 1, as work on the booster continues before engine installation and testing at the launch site. Well, that wraps up this week's recap of the build site. Next up is the launch site, where repairs are ongoing after the launch just over 3 weeks ago. To help you get familiarised, here's a labelled map of the launch site. Have a look at this picture from the flyover on the 8th of November compared to 18th of November. And now between the flyover on the 3rd of December to the 8th of December. Starting right over the suborbital site, we have the cables that are being installed to integrate the suborbital tank farm with the new power grid. This is good news, because we will now soon have the suborbital tank farm running entirely on the power grid. From this image taken on the 18th of November, the installation appeared almost complete as we saw all the piping covered with dirt, only to find a substantial amount of new conduit being laid in new trenches. A little bit to the right, progress is still being made on the new protective wall. Concrete has been poured in the forms, and many others have already been removed. This means it should be finished very soon. Adding to this, we saw some new neon letters being delivered to Starbase on November 27th for a new sign that started to be installed on this wall at the launch site that states, "Gateway to Mars." Here's a picture of the first switch on. Thanks to Anthony Gomez from Rocket Ranch for this fantastic picture. Moving down at the parking lot, we have the booster QD hood that has been removed from the OLM to perform some work on the piping for the booster quick disconnect. Sliding to test stands A and B, we have a booster transport stand, a ship transport stand, the Raptor maintenance platform, and the dance floor stand that has been moved back to the launch site post-launch. We think that the booster and ship stands are here seemingly for temporary storage. Over at test stand B, preparations are underway to receive the new ship prototype that should pair with Booster 10 for the next flight, and that should be Ship 28. A little bit to the right, we have a trailer with the 2 hoses that have been removed from the booster QD. These will be replaced with new ones in the coming days. Going right to the orbital tank farm expansion area, we have a lot of changes. On November 27th, the first of 5 new tanks arrived at the launch site and got put in place right here. The next day, 2 more tanks were delivered and placed to the left of the first one. Lastly, on November 29th, the other 2 were delivered and positioned into their places, this time leaving a big gap between them. We expect another tank to be installed here as they have the concrete bases for it. So there are still 4 tanks that are missing. When do you think they'll get delivered? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. To the south of the new tanks, building of a protective wall is started. This will shield them from the debris flying during static fires and launches. Sliding to the north, we see the storage shed that was damaged by the shockwaves during the IFT-2 launch. It looks like SpaceX decided to get rid of it, including jackhammering the concrete underneath it, possibly in favour of more tanker offload stations. At the orbital tank farm, many things that we predicted are happening at a fast pace. Starting at the methane side, where one of the 2 new subcoolers is already integrated, as the top piping was joined in with the other 2 subcoolers. It is expected that the last one should be, if not already installed by the time you are watching this video. Now to the oxygen side. As you can see, the piping for the new subcoolers is now installed, as well as new sets of valves on both sides of the hippos, and they are replumbing the cryo lines on the road side of the pumps. This is excellent news, as these upgrades will now allow greater flexibility and decrease the time taken for the propellant loading to both vehicles. The argon tank from the fabrication building at the front of the village has been placed here to be used by the welders working on the tank farm upgrades. Moving south to the Deluge farm, lots of digging work has taken place. Some trenches have been dug to the left of the CO2 tank and in front of the pressure valves and water tanks. This work includes the removal of the footings from the old CO2 tank. What are we going to see installed here? A new building? Piping? Electric conduits? Leave your guesses in the comments below. At the base of the tower, we can see concrete has been ripped off around the hatch of the deluge piping. We don't know why this has happened, but we will keep an eye out to solve this mystery. From this angle, we can see that the workers have bridged the gap between the old protective wall and the new section. And with this, a new methane offloading port has been installed. In addition to this, it is evident that SpaceX hasn't finished ripping up bits of concrete. Now let's move to the orbital launch mount, and yes, finally we had the launch of Booster 9 and Ship 25. It happened in the early morning of Saturday, November 18th. After having some issues with the grid fin actuator that ended up with the crew replacing 3 of them and delaying the launch by a full day. Liftoff occurred without any issues, and for the first time all 33 Raptor V2 engines ignited and remained healthy for the entire boost phase of the flight. At the moment of separation, 30 engines shut down as expected, and Ship 25 ignited all 6. Booster 9 then used its grid fins with the second stage exhaust to flip and then relit 9 of the 10 engines to perform the boost back burn. While that was happening, many engines started to shut down prematurely, and then the vehicle exploded. It is speculated that the negative acceleration occurred during separation caused the propellants to slosh and separate from the domes. Then at relight, all of that sloshing propellant fell to the domes, most likely causing damage to the lines. Check this animation made by the space engineer where he simulated the separation environment. It gives you an idea of what fuel slosh could look like inside of a liquid-fueled rocket. Make sure to give him a follow. Even though B9 exploded, Ship 25 fired its engines until T plus 8 minutes and 4 seconds, where it was travelling at 24,100 km per hour. The FTS was then triggered for as yet unknown reasons. Now let's check out how the pad held up during the launch. The most important thing is that the water-cooled steel plate and the concrete held up pretty well. Elon shared this picture saying that it will not require any refurbishments. Look at the engine holes that are the only portion that are not black. Looks like it performed better than they thought. That's all from the launch site for this episode. Let us know in the comments any thought or questions that you may have. And that's it for episode 26 of the Starbase Flyover Update. Thank you for choosing to fly with RGV Aerial Photography, and I hope you all enjoyed the flight. If you liked what you saw today, please subscribe for more episodes and content so you don't miss out on the new videos each week. I'm Jeff A, and we'll see you next week from 10,500 feet.